Okay, 10:40 right on the dot, precise military time, and we are joined on the news line by Joe Sestak, former Admiral of the United States Navy, three-star Admiral, Director of the Defense Policy in the Clinton White House, a former Pennsylvania Congressman, and now seeking the Democratic nod in the U.S. Senate race. And Admiral Sestak, hello.
Laura, it's good to be with you. Joe, please.
All right, Joe, it's wonderful to hear you again. We spoke many times the last time you ran for office, I guess, 6 years ago?
That's right.
And so I'm delighted that you're back. In the past 6 years, what have you been doing to occupy your time?
Well, I turned down all the lobbying jobs, and I'll tell you, they were pretty outrageous. My wife put her hand on my shoulder when I told her one of the offers, and I said, I'm going to go back and teach at our colleges and universities in Pennsylvania. She smiled at me and jokingly said, well, maybe jokingly, are you sure, Joe? But I went to teach Cheney University, the oldest historical black university. At the other end of the state, I taught at Carnegie Mellon. Then in the middle, Penn State, Dickinson, and Army War College. And I love being with our national treasure, the youth of America.
Well, are you still doing that, or are you now full-time just involved in your candidacy?
I was able to sock away a little bit of that adjunct professor pay, and full-time it is.
All right.
Just want to serve again.
Well, you came close 6 years ago again. You defeated then Senator Arlen Specter in the primary for the Democratic Party, but then lost to now Senator Pat Toomey by 80,000 votes out of the more than 4 million that were cast. So is that considered a close loss?
Closest loss that there was of any Senate race, I think, including the two special elections just before the general. Democrats lost 6 seats, and we eked into within 2 points, outfunded 3-1, the largest funding gap in all of America. And Citizens United had happened at that time. It was the year of the Tea Party, and our gubernatorial candidate lost by 9.5. We worked hard on field, on ground, going to churches, going everywhere, standing outside of Wawa, shaking hands, and that's why we came so very close.
And now you've sort of kicked off this senatorial bid with this 422-mile walk across Pennsylvania, which came, I think it did sort of nip Lebanon County, if I'm not mistaken.
Definitely did. And we did two events there. One was for the city, so to speak, the rural area, the rural counties type of events, an event. We did things on dairy caucuses and talked about it there. But I also did another event on infrastructure there because, as you well know, back in about 1910, the farmers banded together and built the very first the road from their own monies to get their produce to market. And so I loved it. And I did that walk, Laura, across America, Pennsylvania, because I wanted people to know that I would be responsible to them. I'd walk in their shoes. I'd understand their challenges from education to healthcare to infrastructure, to rural and urban communities. And then if I, Lord willing, I go to Washington to serve them, I'll continue to walk in their shoes, not D.C.'s shoes.
And what do you peg as the number one concern of Pennsylvanians? Is there any one number one concern?
Without a question, they've lost trust. They really have. That public officials won't be in it for themselves, that they'd be willing to, well, frankly, turn down lobbying jobs, not taking advantage of their past public service. Second, though, and getting to the real working family, how do we get wages rising again? And a key part of that is everywhere I went, the second or third question seemed to be about the cost of education, whether it was to go for an associate's degree, a certificate to become a MIG or TIG welder, or to go to college. People are concerned about accessible, affordable education.
And what is your solution to being able to provide that?
There's two parts to the problem. Supply by the colleges, where their inflation rate has been the highest inflation rate for decades, higher than the cost of food, of inflation higher than the increase in inflation in housing. Therefore, we should say if your inflation rate is above normal inflation, hey, remember you're getting public money, Pell Grants, Stafford loans. You're not going to be getting that. You've got to temper that, much like we did when we said to high schools back in the 70s, hey, look, Title IX, no longer can you get federal money if you don't have equal sports for women as equal sports for men. And by the way, the Atlanta Olympics showed how well that worked with the women dominating once they're given equal access to sports. Second thing is demand. The interest rate is too high that we charge our students. The federal government's going to make $129 billion the next 10 years because of charging too high an interest rate. If we change the interest rate, instead of just a 10-year security, half make it 10-year, the other half 30-year security, because students are paying back their loan longer over time because they have so much to pay back, the interest rate is cut almost in half, and the government makes no money. So we begin to temper down the rising cost of college.
What do you make of Bernie Sanders' assertion that under a Sanders presidency, he's going to try to push for free, community college and free university for American students?
Well, while I would like, of course, everyone to go without a question, I think there needs to be some skin in the game from oneself. I can remember my father, an immigrant from Czechoslovakia, sitting at the table with 8 kids and saying a penny for college, a penny for food. And my mom was a high school math teacher. She went out to school with us when all 8 of us were still in secondary school and grade school. It was part of us. But what we can do is this. We can make it much more affordable. And you bring up a wonderful issue, community colleges. That is where 62% of all Americans are going to college today throughout America. But in Pennsylvania, only 28% of our people in college are in community colleges because only 5% of our colleges are community colleges in Pennsylvania. Across the nation, it's 25%. We do not invest in establishing community colleges. My gosh, our GIs, in the GI Bill, I worked hard, not just to let a soldier coming home go to 4-year college, but go and get a certificate in welding or woodcraft or whatever and become one of the great artisans as manufacturing is about to come home from China.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. One of the problems I see is that there is still, despite a lot of work being done to have credits transfer, there is still a dearth of credits that really realistically transfer if a student does their first 2 years at community college and then wants to go to Millersville or a university to finish out their degree. And so they're still behind the 8 ball.
Laura, what a great issue you just raised. 40% of all college students transfer to another college during their 2 or 4 years before they get their associate's degree or 4-year degree or college degree. 40%, and the loss from one college not taking a credit for another college. I put a bill in when I was a congressman. It's called articulation, the right to have a certain credits transferred, and you can't deny it if the credits meet certain standards. And we should have that implemented. The students are losing billions of dollars because colleges, frankly, just want to say, well, you want to come to us? You'll have to take that course.
Exactly.
That's wrong.
Exactly. And, a lot of kids that certainly fit the bill academically to go to a 4-year institution are doing the first 2 years at home to try to squirrel away extra money so that when they do their junior and senior year in their degree, they can afford it because, Penn State, you look at the tuition for full-time at Penn State, it's outrageous.
Yep.
It's outrageous.
Highest of any public university in America.
Yeah, and that is wrong, and something really has to be done because that was supposed to be the great advantage. Stay in the state, you get in-state tuition, and it's considerably cheaper than the out-of-staters.
So imagine you get to a community college. It's fairly low cost relative to a 4-year college. You get 2 years done, and some places like Drexel University have an agreement. You keep a certain grade level, you're automatically accepted at Drexel, and credits are transferred. But you've got to make that almost mandatory that credits are transferred as long as they're quality colleges.
Now, is that something that would be handled at the congressional level, or is that really more of a General Assembly Pennsylvania issue?
You could do it for within Pennsylvania at the General Assembly, but because so many people move, let's take military youth, and because others move so much, I put it in as a federal standard of here's the standard. Here's what has to be done. You have to meet certain levels of teaching quality, which, by the way, we do already have national accreditation boards for colleges and all. And if you meet them, that means another college has to accept it. And that way, if you want to all of a sudden move from Ohio to Pennsylvania, which we'd love people to do, then all of a sudden your credits are transferred.
On your joesestak.com website, you have a timeline of your life in comparison to Senator Toomey. Two different records of service, and of course, there's obviously a lot of the notations on your side of the chart are in relationship to your naval service, as opposed to Senator Toomey, who went to Harvard University and was working on Wall Street and derivatives trading and all sorts of things like that. I think there is a point to be made, certainly, that you have a wonderful record of service to the nation. But is it fair to try to say, well, because Senator Toomey didn't serve in the military and went into the private sector, somehow that's a bad thing?
Well, I didn't ever put it in a negative light whatsoever. I just posed the question, who does he serve? As he worked for a derivatives trader in China, a Chinese billionaire he worked for developing derivatives, and that billionaire criticized our democracy, saying it was terrible to have a democracy. So my take is that I just merely want people to know that, I left during the Vietnam War era to join the military. I didn't go to Vietnam, but I joined up. And then I stayed in to continue to serve my country. But then when my daughter got brain cancer at the age of 4, I didn't get married, Laura, as you might remember, until I was 47. I couldn't convince anybody. I had my first and only child. Only 8% of kids have survived her brain tumor. She did. Love her. She's wonderful. But I then decided not to become a consultant, as many naval people do, and decided to pay back my country by running for Congress in order to work for what eventually became the Affordable Care Act, health care for everyone. Then when I lost, I decided the Senate race that I had to become a professor at Pennsylvania colleges. My life has been one of service. I can't think of a better way to serve. In fact, we kept our office open here in the district during that terrible recession that we had. We kept it open 7 days a week till 9 o'clock at night, every night, weekends included, because 1,000 people walked in with their homes going into foreclosure. We were able to salvage about 65% of them. But I got to tell you, that's a big difference between someone who went off and became a lobbyist for $1 million, as he did, Senator Toomey, for Club for Growth. Or, that's fine to go to Wall Street, has a purpose, but it was a different type of service. I served our country, and I'd like to continue to serve people, Americans, as their senator. What
is the difference between you and the other Democrat in this primary race for the Democratic nod, Katie McGinty?
Yeah, I've said everywhere I went, anybody wants to get in should get in. I'm a big believer in that. So my focus almost exclusively has been, what can I bring to people of Pennsylvania to best serve them? And how harmful is a senator like Senator Toomey, who voted to send me to war? He visited my aircraft carriers. We were bombing away in Iraq. Then he came home and voted against 10 straight veterans' bills that could take care of my vets coming home. That's where my focus is. But in addition, while I want to work on health care, education, pensions, what I also want to work on with my military background is having people understand an increasingly dangerous world, from China to ISIS to Iran to Russia, which is rebuilding its navy, that you need cool heads. People understand, and we don't have them down there in the Senate on the Democratic side or the Republican side, that militaries, we can stop a problem, but we don't fix a problem. Use us wisely, because no one thinks we fixed Iraq. So you're really not even focusing on the McGinty race? You're really just pointing all of your efforts toward highlighting the differences between you and Toomey? Absolutely. And I think that's important, because If trust is the biggest deficit we have in America today, I want them to know what I'll do as a senator and how harmful our present senator's lack of policies are, where he has voted to shut down the only senator or congressman in all of Pennsylvania to vote 3 times. And I want them to know, do you want to restore the American dream? Here's how I will work it. And that's why I published my book, To Restore the American Dream.
All right, I only have about 2 minutes left here, and I wanted to ask you just on the current event of the situation with these 10 sailors that drifted into Iranian waters and were held by the Iranian military for a number of hours. What is your take on that? I mean, how can today's modern United States naval ships lose navigational focus?
Well, this was a very, very small riverine almost kind of vessel. And I've actually been on them. I go with my sailors as a Navy admiral, would board ships to check for contraband before they enter the ports of Iraq. And all of a sudden, a satellite, you've had it as you've driven around Pennsylvania, all of a sudden a satellite drops sync for 10, 15 seconds. By the time it syncs up, Persian Gulf is so narrow. There's hundreds of small boats going back and forth, smuggling cigarettes from UAE. You might have everything.
So what were these boats being used for, in your estimation?
Logistics, almost primarily. They were going from Kuwait to Bahrain, where we have bases in both, support places, and probably were just going down to bring some logistics or to do some training.
No spying?
Pardon me?
No spying?
No, because, you see, they drifted into Iranian. They were too low in the water to do any type of spying. We would do that with our satellites or even planes, from a little, what would stand off 12 and could see down much better. They were just, and you don't put people into harm's way like that for a spying mission.
And so
you know what?
Was it the fact that they were taken, I don't know if you want to say hostage for a period of time? What is your take on that? Because the Obama administration has gotten a lot of flack for not, I guess, unleashing the dogs of war on the Iranians.
Well, if the North Koreans, for example, drifted into our territorial waters we own, like Iran owned those waters, and all of a sudden we're lost, and we would board that ship. And if I was there, there's no way I'd let my sailors go on board an adversarial nation ship, because that's how they look at us, and that's how we look at them, Iran. If they had drifted in our waters without them standing up, backs turned to us, hands up in the air. My gosh, when I went on with my sailors onto those vessels going into Iraq with merchantmen, we made sure that there was a helicopter up there with a gun pointed down to protect us as we went up a 30-foot ladder all the way to the back of the boat and had to stand there showing their hands. There's safety concerns on both sides. That's how we would have done. Now, did they take propaganda advantage of it by sending it out as there? Sure they did. But you know what? We drifted into their water, and here's the key. When 2007, when the British sailors were taken like that, they kept them 13 days. Because of this Iranian accord, we had a hotline to pick up the phone, call over, and get it resolved. When I was an admiral, I recommended that we have an INC agreement, incident at sea agreement, like we do with the Soviet Union during the Cold War. We could pick up the hotline and resolve a situation that was really very innocent, but the other one sees his guns that are there on this boat, and they're drifting in the water. What's going on? But you can quickly resolve it. This is what the rules of the road at sea are for. Okay. And you take precautions to make sure your sailors aren't harmed.
All right. Admiral Sestak, if people want to find out more, just go to joesestak.com.
That is correct. joesestak.com, SESTAK, Laura.
All right. It's a pleasure to talk to you. Come to Lebanon County soon.
I will.
All right.
Have a great PA day.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Joe Sestak, there on the Newsline. Time for news.